On behalf of MPAC's Hollywood Bureau and MuslimARC, we'd like to thank the Writers Guild Foundation for their support of elevating voices of underrepresented communities by hosting events such as these. We'd like to thank specifically Executive Director Katie Buckland, Director of Events and Communications, Enid Portuguese, and Events and Operations Coordinator, Dustin Fleischman, who's outside. Their partnership and friendship and support has been tremendous throughout the years, and honestly, thank you. Thank you for being with us on this journey. The Writers Guild Foundation is a premier resource for emerging writers and movie and TV lovers in Hollywood. The foundation is unmatched in its mission to promote and preserve the craft, the history, and the voices of storytelling. All proceeds from tonight's ticket sales go towards supporting the foundation's library, which we hope you can become regular members of and visitors of. For more information and to donate to the foundation, please visit wgfoundation.org. When you came in this evening, you were given, I believe, this sheet. It has all our handles for tonight's tweeting. Our hashtag is being black and Muslim. So hashtag being black and Muslim, and all our handles are on here. Please tweet to your heart's content. MPAC's Hollywood Bureau changes the narrative of Muslims in the entertainment industry so that audiences see Muslims as vital contributors to creating social and cultural change in America and around the world. For more information on MPAC, visit mpachollywoodbureau.org. MuslimARC, who is our partner for tonight, is a human rights education organization that connects multi-faith and multi-racial networks through digital media, storytelling, and dialogue. To learn more about their important work, please visit muslimarc.org. MPAC has organized and spoken on many panels around the portrayals of representation of Muslims on TV and film, but we have never organized one around such a niche topic. When we're speaking to writers in writers' room and consulting on TV shows, we're often asked what stories are missing about the Muslim community in the industry. There are two answers for that question. The first one is usually that's missing is authentic portrayals of strong women, strong Muslim women, and another glaring omission is the portrayals of black Muslims on TV and film. And for a community that is part of the history of America, that is integral to the history of America, that's an omission that is unacceptable. The black Muslim community makes up over 25% of the Muslim population in all of America. And why are they sorely missing? That has yet to be answered, and hopefully tonight we will be scratching the surface. That is why we are actually here tonight. So we're not going to solve anything tonight, but we're definitely going to tackle it and try to unpack it. The format of the evening is an hour discussion followed by Q&A, and because we want to get as many questions in as possible, make sure that your questions are in the form of a question. And so if you could just do us that favor, we can get as many questions in, that'd be great. And with that, I'm going to turn over the floor to our friend and our warrior, Marguerite Hill.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to just dive right in. Your stories are so important. And I would like you to take 3 minutes, and we're going to go from left all the way to the end to share your story of how you came into entertainment. And what have you done to lift up the Black Muslim narrative? Okay, Naishla first.
Okay, well, I will start. My journey into entertainment, I think, began when I was a young girl. I grew up in the East Bay area, and I always knew that I wanted to be an artist. At a young age, I didn't know what type of artist I wanted to be. Filmmaking was not a career that I knew about when I was young. It wasn't an option for me. So I really kind of related to, dancing. I loved writing poetry, creative writing. I loved, theater and all of the different arts. And I found my voice in poetry and creative writing. And that is really what opened up an exploration into identity, into family, into relationships that I feel like informs all of my film work. Through my teen years and into college, I went to UC Berkeley. I continued to write poetry and creative writing, and I also picked up photography. And I started to merge my creative writing with photography, and I knew I wanted to do something bigger and something more epic. And that was the decision to become a filmmaker when I was a junior in undergrad. And I really didn't know all that was involved in that. Like, it was a big endeavor. And like I said, coming from the Bay, you know, really it wasn't a career that was really popularized. So I took a leap of faith, and I was supported by a lot of people. I started to take classes. I started to go out in Oakland and just shoot my films and teach myself. And then I went to film school and got kind of a formal education in directing, writing, screenwriting, and I knew that that was my calling. I just fell in love with screenwriting, and I fell in love with the form. And from there, it was just, you know, telling my stories, directing, writing short films, directing, learning about directing, writing a lot of feature screenplays that ended up winning awards and kind of going on and, you know, kind of cementing my reputation within the independent film community. Also wrote a lot about independent film as a film critic and as an essayist. So I was always immersed in that community, and I love to give voice to stories that I had never seen. Stories of people in my community that I just had never seen in film or TV. And that's where my debut film, Jen, comes from. Wanting to represent the community that I come from in the Bay Area, a mostly African-American Muslim community of complex individuals who I just had never seen reflected on screen. And also being a participant and being involved in that community as a Black girl and struggling with issues related to identity. This was a real thing for me, and I knew that it deserved to be out into the world. So that's really how I came to be and what informs my journey.
Thank you.
Hello. I am an actor and a comedian, and I'd say that at a very young age, I just always knew I wanted to be a performer. So starting out with forcing my family to watch me perform for them and dance routines. But I think doing a play very early in 5th grade was really when it was sparked for me. When the teacher gave us permission to kind of create our characters and design our costumes, I got very excited and took over with our group just a little bit. And that was maybe one of my earliest experiences when I was formally acting. My parents were very supportive. I'm very lucky for that. And they put me in classes very young, and so I was trained. I went to college but did not major in acting. I was too terrified. But I took the leap and moved to Los Angeles to pursue it professionally, and I've been doing that ever since. I also perform as a comedian. I do sketch primarily at UCB. I'm on a house team there, so I got into doing sketch. A friend told me, like, you should take classes, so I took classes at IO West, which is also another improv school, started in Chicago, and it's down here as well. And I did the program there, and then I moved over to UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade, so I performed there regularly. Also, a friend convinced me, I had always wanted to do stand-up for a while, but I was terrified again. So much terror in college, so I eventually took the leap and started out here. A friend was like, Trevina, you should be doing stand-up. That's what you should be doing. I was like, really? I should be doing stand-up? And I entered a contest, the California's Funniest Women contest, and that was really fun. The first year I placed, the second year I submitted, I came in first place with that, and it just started a thing. And then after that, very early in my stand-up career, somehow I booked the reboot of Comic View, and I performed. I know, it's a wow, because I'm like, that's not even my demo, but it was fantastic. So I did that, and you know, ever since that I did the CBS Diversity Showcase a couple years ago, and I've just been performing as an actor, auditioning. I've booked a few films and shows, commercials, voiceover, all of that sort of stuff. So I think the way that I probably uplift the Black Muslim narrative is I incorporated it into my stand-up eventually. Someone convinced me to do that because I didn't really talk about it much, and I realized that I didn't see a lot of people that were Muslim and doing comedy or doing stand-up, but also Muslim doing comedy that looked like me. So yeah, I started opening up and talking about my experience. I also embraced Islam later on in life, so I didn't grow up with it, and that perspective I think is also very unique, and I think it's something worth being shared, and it's not really discussed either. So I talk about that, and being in spaces where people don't encounter people that look or think like me often is helpful, and I think it like bridges our communities. So that's what I like to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace, y'all. My name is Qasim Basir. It's like Qasim, like blossom or awesome, or just so you know, because being Black and Muslim, my name, I say it like 4 more times after that, because people are like, wait, how do you say it? How do you spell it?
Yeah.
It's more confusing when you spell it, but anyway. It just called me Q. I went through a Q phase, but now I actually like my name. I love my name, you know? So I started, so I came up between Ann Arbor and Detroit, Michigan, and so Detroit's like the Bay, but in the Midwest, right? It's like, I went to Oakland, it was like the same thing, Detroit and Oakland. I thought I was, you know, but anyway. So I took a class in high school, and I fell in love with film. I was like 16, 17, and I would do little films here and there, just shoot stuff with my little brother and my cousin. Never thought I could do this for a living. I mean, I had never known anyone that had gone that far in life. It's just, sometimes you're only really seeing what's in front of you, and that was not in front of me. It was like a whole different world. So I kind of put it away. I went to college. I got a degree in criminal justice pre-law. But my senior year of college, summer before my senior year, I got in this major car accident. Changed the whole course of my life. They had to like revive me. It was that bad. So so from there, I think that was, at the time, it was tragic, and I had these injuries and almost died and all this stuff, and it was the worst thing to happen. But then through life, and now it seems like it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, because at that point I was able to like face the thing that a lot of us fear, you know, and it was right in front of me. And I think sometimes when you face mortality at a young age, you get a lot of the BS out of the way. And so for the rest of my journey, it's been like, all right, well, what am I doing here? And actually, I had like my LSAT books, study books in that truck, and they burned. Literally, it was, if that's not assigned. And that's when I knew how much LSAT books cost. But anyway, I'm not a comedian. She's the comedian. So from there, I was like, all right, well, let me actually do what I love. So I finished with that degree, but I started running around Detroit shooting movies here and there, and I would like, you know, make these DVDs and like sell them at the liquor store. You know, I would bring them to the liquor store, and like they would be up in Detroit. They have these glass, this glass between you and the register, which is like 2 inches thick, and my DVD would be right there. Yeah, and so I would go every week, like, oh, how many did you sell? And they'd be like, we sold like 1. And I'd be like, well, tell them a guy from here made this. You know, when you sell it, you got to let them know. And, you know, so I would make these movies. And, you know, eventually I had to move from Detroit. This was before the incentive was there and all that. So no one was making movies in Detroit. So I moved to New York, made several shorts, eventually made my first feature, Muslim, which was actually about a Black Muslim dude. Thanks, thank you. And I got, I managed to find an investor and like, you know, get Danny Glover to be in the movie, and Nia Long and Evan Ross and all these wonderful people, Roger Gavir Smith. And that movie ended up taking me around the world. And, you know, I wasn't really in the business yet. Like, I had been to LA like twice at that point, and for a couple of days. So I didn't really know much about the business. I had known how to like find investors, and I'd learned at that point how to make a movie. And just by reading everything I could and watching and studying the people I admired. And then from there, kept trying and, eventually moved to LA got my second film made, Destined, and then that led to my third one, which was just at Sundance just last year, A Boy, a Girl, a Dream. So within that's like the brief, like 2 or 3 minute version. But within that was a lot of like struggle and pain and like 10,000 no's and, all the stuff that, I've made 3 movies, but I've written like 10 and, a lot of them didn't get made. And, so all of that stuff is within that little, that little story I just told. And, but, I tend to be optimistic about where things are going in terms of the widening of the representation of people. And, when I made that film, Muslim, it might have been the first of its kind, which, it was very difficult to get it distributed and get it out. But, coming up in a place where it's as diverse as this country and having never seen your story on screen is pretty messed up, I think. And I think everyone deserves to get their story told, and that's why I told mine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, and peace as well. So my origin story, that's a reference, right, to what comic books, right? So my story starts with I was walking down the hall and then a spider bit me. No, I'm just playing. No, I'm from a really big family, and I grew up in the hood in South Central LA, in the original South Central, and a large family. There's like 1 million of us, and so around 9 years old, my dad was teaching at a middle school called Horseman Middle School, and he had access to a video camera, and so I was able to. I actually just took the video camera, and we're talking like, I'm giving my age away here, but this is like early 80s, right? So I'm early 80s, and my dad has this video camera, and this is when people thought video cameras were like, like aliens, like they were scared of them, right? But my dad got it because he was the only teacher, I think, at his school that would actually deal with the technology, and so I didn't even know really what it was. Before I was using a video camera, I was able to use actual like tape deck. Like back in the day, they had like these tape decks, like tape players. And I was always fascinated with stories, like people, because I'm from a big family. So in my family, if you can't tell a good story, you don't get to talk. And my dad is a writer, and he's a big deal. So I have to be able to talk. If you can't talk, you get skipped over. So I would come up with these like, almost like scripts, but not quite scripts. This is like before I had the video camera, and I'd have everybody sit around a table, and I'd push the tape player, and people would do their parts, and then I'd get really anxious if they didn't, or get really OCD if they didn't hit the part, right? I don't even know where this was coming from, right? And then eventually I do this movie at 9 years old, and we have the footage. My dad was the DP, and it was called, I think, The Odin Western, and I had given specific instructions to my younger brother to what to do, and at some point he ends the film with just killing everybody. So that is like my early start, and so then after that I get really bad because I'm in the hood, and I don't care about that anymore. I'm like at 4 different high schools, and I kind of go off into my own thing, and then I think like my senior year, my mom passes away, and then I think that happened, right? So 17, she passes away. Then I go to film school. I started at San Diego State, and I'm eventually go into their film program, and then at some point I leave there and go to USC, and I go into the film school at USC, and then I graduate from there, and I go to UCLA, and I go in the film program there. And how I started to, you start making your short films, and one of the first films I actually made was a film about my mom passing away. So for me, film making is processing, or making story, like, any kind of story I tell that's like moving images is typically about processing, like an emotion for me. I'm terrible in relationships, right? So that's like another thing. So like emotions for me, like I can process it in the film, right? So I say that because like my last film is about divorce. But one of my first films was about my mom passing away, and that film for me was a way to like process that emotion, but also deal with grief and heal, right? And then I move on from that, and I make a couple of films. But at some point, this is what specifically happens that relates to being Black and Muslim. So I'm in class at UCLA, and my dad is actually at this point in Mecca. He's on Hajj, and I'm really worried about my dad dying, right? Because that's the year of the fire, one of the fires that a lot of people died. And I'm talking to a teacher, and I remember the teacher was like, "Oh, your dad's not at the real Hajj." He's not, like, there was this conversation, like, my dad was not at the real Hajj. I was like, well, where's he at, Disneyland Hajj? Like, let me know, you know? But then and this was a few moments of that, like, in school with people who are, like, teaching and they're supposed to know, and they just didn't know that there were Black Muslims or people who were Muslim who happened to be Black. And so, yes, literally, and there was a way they would pick through the questions, and I could tell, like, they don't know what the heck, they don't know anything that I'm talking about. So I ended up making this film called Bilalian, which was about our Muslim community, which was about being Black and Muslim, which was about the term that our leader, Wardi Muhammad, at some point had given to us the name Bilalian, which is just a combination of being Black and Muslim, right? And so that was one of the first, that was a documentary I made that it got way too much attention. Like, I literally just was like, oh, I gotta make this movie because nobody knows who the hell we are. And we were editing it months before, like, while we're editing the film, September 11th happens. And I remember, I'll say, Johnny Simmons called me up, one of my, a professor I used to work for and who was also a DP. He called me, or I called him, or however, we were on the phone, and we had a conversation. I remember him saying, you know, if you have to, you can come and stay here. So we were having those kind of conversations. I also, in that moment, I remember picking up the phone and getting, whatever, there's a whole bunch of conspiracy stuff, but whatever. Mainly just saying I remember moments of feeling like I maybe didn't fit into this country. You know what I mean? Like, this is a space of like, oh, wait, because it seemed like we could be possibly, you know, at some point, you know, be under siege or whatever, right? So there was a way that I realized that filmmaking for me at that point could be resistance. It could be a place to define myself. And so I just kind of continued that. And I guess most recently I did a film called Muslima's Guide to Marriage, which is a comedy. So, and that film is about divorce. And I only mentioned that because I said the thing earlier about processing emotions. And so for me, like every project, I'm working on a TV show right now with Kevin Hart's company, Heartbeat. And so that is about being Black and Muslim. So for me, everything most of my work is centered around being Black and Muslim. So there's my origin story. No spider.
In the Islamic tradition, spiders are a positive sign. We're not supposed to kill spiders. We could go into that story, but
I do.
And we have Spider-Man. Yeah, so I think this is time to get real, right? Like, that's real, but like we're gonna say some honest stuff, and some people may be upset with us in the industry, because I'm gonna go there. So this week, a film came out, Sweetness in the Belly, where you have you?
Yeah, I saw it.
You know, you can like raise your hand if you've seen it online. So the synopsis is that Dakota Fanning is playing, and the headline came out that she was a white Ethiopian Muslim and a refugee. So you have who falls in love. Maybe you could do. Can you do the little scenario?
I don't know too much about it, but I think it's supposed to be based on a book, and it's about a white Ethiopian refugee who falls in love with a Black man, and it's a love story, and that's the story.
So this is the story that we're getting out out of Africa, right? Or of all the issues, all the refugees. And so just highlighting the idea now, Black Muslims make 25% of the American Muslim population. Sub-Saharan Africans, probably 15 to 18%. Arabs are about 18 globally. Arabs are about 18% globally. So you're just as likely to be Black as Arab, but yet we have a lot of stories that tell about, we have a lot of stories about the Arab American experience or the South Asian experience. Maybe we can, one or two can chime in on, even though we have those type of statistics, why is it that a story like that would be told? One, about African Muslims as representative, and then the second part of the question is why do you think that there is the challenge of getting Black Muslim stories and the diversity of Black Muslims from Africa, the Caribbean, Central, South America, and African American stories? What are the challenges, what are the reasons why there are some challenges? So anyone wants to chime in?
I can answer the second part.
Okay.
I just, because I didn't even know about this film. I'm kind of I have a new baby at home, so I've been missing a lot of stuff. People been like, Trump said this. I'm like, we said what? But I'm missing things. But the second part, I just think there's a lot of reasons. But from my perspective, I imagine it has to do with a few things. One, just the limited amount of people that are in the industry that are Black Muslim people, right? So it's not necessarily encouraged in the Muslim community to go into film, right? It's like, yo, what are you gonna do, Habibi? And it's like, you're gonna be a doctor, a lawyer, or this or that. You're gonna, but no one's parents ever encouraged them to go into film. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure. And so, I think that's just like, that's one of the main reasons, and that it's hard enough to get a film made as it is. If you're going to make a film that is hard to get made, such as a film that has Black Muslim leads in it, and that's telling that particular story, it's probably going to be even harder if there's not people of that demographic in the room. And that's my main. That's basically how I see it.
Speaking to that, I agree 100%. From our experience making Jen, it was really difficult to get people to understand the world that we were trying to bring to life, because we are pitching to majority white men who, a lot of them did not have an awareness of this character, of just like contemporary Black Muslim life, and there was no frame of reference that they had to go off. And we're in an industry, it's a business, and so a lot of times people want to know, what are your film comps? What other films have made money and have brought people out that we can point to as a kind of reference for your film? And of course, we talk about Muslim and we talk about what was made, but there's still this just lack of awareness. I don't even know if it's ignorance or just not them just having no kind of interest in kind of understanding that world. I remember pitching with my producer, Averill Speaks, and kind of the closest thing they could really get to was like, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, which, I revere them and they're leaders in our community, but there's been so much since then that we can point to in our community that can really inform this film, and not just that historical frame of reference. So I think it is an issue when the people that you're pitching to and the people that you're seeking money from don't look like you and don't have an understanding of the stories that you're trying to tell. And some of those people were very curious, like they really were like, wow, I've never seen it, but to put money behind something that was not proven to be a success or it didn't have a track record was hard, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to make our film independently and do it our way and tell the story the way we wanted to tell it. We did not have people telling us you have to cater to a certain white gaze.
So no Dakota Fanning.
No,
as the main
we
character.
said we're gonna tell this the way we want to tell it, and it was difficult because we're making a movie for a little bit of money, but the freedom that we had was just beautiful and allowed for people to see themselves in the movie. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
So-
Marguerite, can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
I was just gonna say, first start with Q. Like, actually, I left this out of my origin story, but like my dad actually wrote a book called Crips that got turned into this movie called South Central.
I love that movie.
Yeah, and my dad was actually my senior year making that film. So, like, I'm kind of like spoiled in a way because my father, like, you know, my dad's name is Donald Bakir, and at that time, I think it was, I know it was Oliver Stone who, you know, helped get that film made, and then Steve Anderson in the direction of it, who actually I believe went to UCLA for, which I will later go to film school there as well. But I remember being on that set and not understanding, because my dad was making it look so effortless, you know, and he also like encouraged me. Like, I actually am a little spoiled because truthfully, like, I literally had no other career choice. You know, like, I'm a professor, which, you know, at Cal State LA, and I teach film, but this is it's ingrained in me. Like, I don't even have any other choice, and like everybody in my family just supports me in it. So there's a way that like I've been independent, or what, I don't even consider myself independent. When I want to make something, I went to one of the places, you know, we always pitch to, and they were like, how the heck are you doing that? Like, how are you doing all this stuff? And I was just like, when I want to make something, I just make it. But I think, let me tell you why I believe that's happened, is because I was actually born into the Nation of Islam originally, and I came under this idea of just like doing for self and making things without like asking for permission from you know, outside, right? So there's a way that my mind always thinks about it like that, but maybe it's a little naive. But that kind of goes to this question. When I saw the optics on that film, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Somebody sent it to me. But I don't know. I gotta learn and see who those filmmakers are, and because is it an Ethiopian filmmaker?
It is, and his last film, Defred, is beautiful.
Okay.
I interviewed him for Shadow and Axe some years ago, and he's so aware of what he wants and kind of really privileging Ethiopian people. So I don't know what went into him making that film, but I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know.
But so the thing I would point out is that I think that there was a strategy at some point of putting white characters into your projects, or focus, or somehow, like, I know I see a filmmaker here, I see Disha Deshawn, who I went to film school with, and so I another Black Muslim filmmaker. And I know that at some point, I remember there was a conversation we would have, and she had when she had a film. I thought and there was a conversation about, I think you had a Black Muslim woman at the center, and then it was about lifting the white character up in the film, right, to get it made. So that is sometimes it's a strategy, right? It's a strategy of bringing in that white character because you know you're not going to be able to. There's a reason why there's a gap between one of my films to the next, and some of it is like, you know, people just don't see you as somebody who can tell mainstream story, right? And then your story itself, being Black and Muslim, people just don't know enough about, right? So maybe sometimes it's a strategy to put white characters in to get it made. The other thing is, I just wanted to say this last part, which is that I do not want to be on this panel and act like non-Black Muslims are getting it fair shake too. I think the idea, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but I want to be clear. Like, there are multiple books about this. I'm a professor, so I'm doing my professor stuff too. But multiple books and studies that show, like, you know, they don't fare better as well. Like, you know, I'm talking about Indo-Pak community, right? Arab community. They're screwed up too in terms of a representation. But being black, we already know, right? 100 years of us being segregated in cinema, and then you add on top of that being Muslim, right? So you put those two together, of course it's going to be a hot, mess in terms of representation. But I think one of the reasons black Muslims are left out, because in order to talk about black Muslims, if you talk about black American Muslims, you have to talk about white supremacy, right? You have to talk about the Nation of Islam as a resistance movement to that, right? And I think that is one of the ways that we've been left out in some way, because it's like, oh, we have to talk about something we don't even feel comfortable talking about until more recently.
Yeah, that's really a powerful point. Thank you. Just a lot of nuance there, so I appreciate that lifted up. I want to also make the shift, and without, as we, there's multiple stories for American Muslims, and that's really important, and all the stories are significant. And what we see in the Muslim community is certain people are celebrated, right? Certain actors, certain public figures, and Trevina, I want to know, how have you been received as an actress in the Muslim community? Where normally, if you have the name, then people are like, hey, special guests, speaking, there's a lot of celebration. And is that happening for you, or are there some challenges of you being an actor and being black and Muslim?
I think for the most part, my experience as of now has been positive. I think very initially when I was coming around the Muslims, and I was like, yeah, I'm an actor, so I'm trying to do it. People be like, stop the law, you want to be an actor? I don't know, sister, you sure you want to do something else? Maybe you can be a teacher and teach acting, maybe. But I have been very fortunate that I think that for the most part, it's been positively received by people. And I think there's possibly been a shift, and people like to see themselves reflected, I think, in media. So I think that's helpful. If I avoid the comment section, I think it continues to be positive. I still do get resistance. Those are some of the challenges. I know we're supposed to not look in the comment section of videos, but I've definitely gotten the sister, I thought, or you were funny until I realized you were Muslim. That's a direct quote. Or, something about Muhammad's daughters. Or sometimes comments people have to say about they think maybe there's one way to be Muslim, and so they might have problems with that. I remember I did a show once, and after I did a comedy show, and after the show, a Muslim sister approached me and said, very funny, but is it haram to do comedy? Is that okay? Are you sure that's okay? You're not really Muslim, are you? You just said that. You're not Muslim, you don't practice. I was like, oh, no, actually I do. And I asked her when she asked me if it was sinful for me to be doing comedy. I said, well, did you laugh? She have nothing to say about that, but so yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of challenges in general in the world. What I love to do though is to spring my Islam on people, because most people don't know. I'm visibly Muslim in my practice, I'm openly Muslim. If you look at me, if you follow anything about me, you'll find that out. But I know I don't look like what people think a Muslim looks like if I'm walking down the street. So I think that just being an example and living, and people are like, wait a minute, what? You do what? Interesting. If I'm on set and I'm fasting, then you do the creeping Sharia. But that's really it. I don't really have a lot of challenges, I think, other than wanting to see more people that look like me represented in media and that have similar stories. So I'm really grateful for our filmmakers here creating those narratives and stories. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, their families and all the support is so inspiring. So we hope to let your children, your siblings, your friends support them in that. Yeah, so we talked about like some of the writing, like even with the movie that has a Black Muslim and Ethiopian producer. For those who are interested in writing and want to write diverse characters, Nigel, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the challenges for both non-Black Muslims, but also non-Muslim African Americans in developing authentic Black Muslim roles?
The challenges for people who are outside of that. I think it's hard if you're not living that existence or that experience to really know what it's about. I just, from my own experience, I always approach writing characters. I'm a very character-based kind of director and writer, as complicated beings. I don't do like types or tropes or characters. I don't care if it's a Muslim, if it's not a Muslim. I want the character to be real and to feel like a real person. And real people go through struggles in life, you know? Real people are struggling internally. And I think that's what resonates in my work, specifically in Jen, is that you see characters straddling existences and straddling gray areas. There's always not a clear right and wrong to the way that people live. Some people are just trying to strive to be better. And I think that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in perfect saints or perfect people who just do the right thing every day. I didn't see those people around me, and I don't see those people around me, even in the Muslim community, so I'm not going to write those people. I'm going to write people that are just living life and trying to be better people and trying to get through the day. And I think that's where the nuance comes from. Growing up, my father, who is such a big influence on me artistically, you know, he loved to dance. Like, he just loved to dance. He would go out to dance at night. He would bring a bean pie home. We would go to the mosque, go to the masjid in the morning, eat some buttermilk pancakes. And my dad was just like the dancer and just having a life, but he is a Muslim, and he is so devout and just full of love and life. And I just said, I cannot allow our representation and these characters not to be endowed with that life that I experienced growing up. The Muslim community I come from, people were funny and loved music, and it just, I can't. So I think if you're outside of that and you've never seen Muslims or Black people just living life as people, you will be at a disadvantage when trying to write them. And when it comes to like TV or writer's room, just get us in there. Yes. Get us in the writer's room. If you're trying to write a character who's a Black Muslim or a Muslim, I mean, this is tricky because I feel like that should be done by someone who's from that world, but it's about exposing yourself, talking to people, educating yourself, being aware. You know, I was recently in a writer's room, and it was a great experience, but I was so surprised to know that some people just had zero knowledge of Islam, just zero. And I was just like, wow. I grew up in a world where I was required to know about Christianity. I was required to know about a Christmas song and about all these different things, but they had no idea what was going on in Islam or in a Black Muslim life. So that's why I was glad to be in there, because I was able to contribute to that conversation. But
thank you for being there.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to chime in?
What was the question again? I want to make sure I
Like,
don't.
what are the challenges of people who are outside of the community, the Black Muslim community, non-Black Muslims or non-Muslim Black writers writing authentic Black Muslim roles?
I think for me, I don't even want to answer that question, because I feel like that question is giving people instructions on how to write Black Muslims. And so for me, I feel like, you know, we just talked about like the idea of getting the shot, right? Like we're, you know, being blessed to get the shot, right? But the reality is like, I don't, I mean, it's late, so I'm going to talk from my heart, which is, hell no, I'm not answering that. That's instructions for people on how to, you know, it's like, I remember this happened, Deisha probably remembers this, where there was this, somebody sent a link or something many years ago, an email saying, this is how you write black characters. And it was like a real stereotypical dialogue for black characters. And I remember you openly, I thought, responded in the email of like, this is ridiculous, right? So like, the reality is, we don't have enough stories about black Muslims to be handing it out. Call us, and if we can't do it, we'll call somebody we know. And that's how that's gonna go. No instructions, you know? And I think the reality is that if I start telling people that, then I, you know, like the point is, I don't get to write other people's stories, period.
I mean, we've seen it happen for 100 years. I mean, but not it. So if you consider the history of film, 120 years old. So for about 100 of those, white men were writing everybody's story. And so what we had was extreme. Like, let's talk about black people. What we had was extreme, violent, polarizing elements of who we were. We had blackface. We had, you know, they played Birth of a Nation at the White House. That happened here in this country, in the White House, and that movie revived.
They still play it.
They still play it
in some film classes, like
right,
yes,
right.
Filmmaking.
So this is a little bit of the short history, right? So then in the last 30 or so years, you've had people come along, and obviously there have been people, Michelle and all, you know. So I'm not saying that in that time no one else made any movies. So there have been people, but by and large, in the last 30, 20 years maybe, it's really starting to spread out. And with that, you have seen much better portrayals of people of all different races and nationalities and religions. Why? Because people got a chance to get in there and speak from their own voices. Women got to speak from their voices. You know, Hispanic folks as people. So we're starting to see much, much better. And where we are with black Muslim material, we're just at the infancy of it anyway. So like, if you talk about, you know, wanting to do it right this time, when more material starts to come out with black Muslim folks in it, just like these two said, get black Muslim folks in the room. And then we won't have what we had before.
Thank you. That's
And it also, I was going to say, it makes it easier for the performer than when you get the material.
Yes.
You know, when I'm reading stuff and I'm like, okay, yeah, a black person did not write this dialogue.
Thank you, because I was going to ask you that. Have you run across that when you were looked at a script and you're like, this person does not understand?
For sure. And it means so much. You need to have people. It's not just having the representation on camera, usually when we're sprinkled in by the guild and union requirements, but true talk. But you need people in the writer's room to say, no, we're going to sleep in a headscarf because the black girl ain't going to go to bed with her hair. I'm like, you know, like little things. You just look at things with very specific experience. No one says that. I mean, you could, like, people sometimes you could write like, okay, yeah, oh, white man wrote that dialogue because no one greets each other like that. So I think it's very important you have writers in a room so then you can have a more authentic portrayal by a performer when they're in front of the camera. Because if not, you're just, well, I'm saying these lines. And I've absolutely been there when I was like, okay, well, as a black woman, can I say what I think she would actually say as opposed to this line? Doesn't always work, but when it does, I try, because all those things matter. Behind the camera, the person doing the makeup, all those things. Yeah, get black people.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful and provides important insight, because I've definitely seen this happen where there were certain depictions of the Nation of Islam, and I'm like, that sister's scarf would not look like
The
that.
scarf.
You know, that sister would not say that, you know, coming from the community. So I think that's very important to understand. The cultural competency piece is something that that's really speaking to me. Okay, so we're talking about making these changes from the top to the bottom, like we're people behind the screens, the decision makers. how can we help creatives and executives, people in the industry that, we know it's a money-making thing, but diversity makes a lot of money, right? But how can we help them expand their concept of Muslim narratives in a way that allows space, like expands the space for Black Muslim narratives to breathe? Any suggestion? What can we do to organize? I have an organizing back, so I'm like, how do we do some systems change?
I think we'd probably want to have the opportunity to just start making stuff to show that it works, right? To show that there's a demographic that wants to see it, that there is a completely underserved, undernourished population in this country and abroad that would love to see these things. And I think the moment they see this and how much of an interest there is for it, and how it works, they would be more inclined to want to do these kinds of TV shows and movies. Again, we're kind of at the beginning of this, and when you mentioned having references to talk about with your movie, like with mine, I had zero. Like literally, they're like, "Oh, so what is this like?" And I'm like, "It's its own thing," which is partly why I had to go outside the industry to find money for it, but. I think the idea of making things and then becoming successful and people understanding that this exists at all is where we could start with it. But it's gonna take someone who has some courage to do that, because this industry it's a lot about comps and what is this like. Can you give me an example of what else is done well? So I think it's gonna take people with courage who say, all right, I'm going to brave this new world of content where people haven't been before and try this. And so I think it starts there.
And I think a big thing is people who are in those higher up positions will have to believe in the potential of the film enough to market it and
Yes.
to put
Yeah.
marketing money
Yeah.
behind that film to serve that audience. I think with my film specifically, we got distribution. We out of South by Southwest, I won a grand jury award for screenwriting, went on to screen at many festivals, won many awards and acclaim. But when it got to marketing and getting the film out, our distributor just was, you kind of didn't do it, and that affected the ability for that film to have a life and to make money and to be seen by people. Now the film, people are watching it on Amazon Prime, and it's still going. We just got a New York Times write-up today, so it's still going. Just because the spirit of it won't die because it's online, and the New York City is doing a theatrical run. But if people in the industry don't have enough foresight to see that we have to serve our audience through smart marketing, that is how movies a lot of times reach their audience, and people will come out and support and spend their dollars. But if they don't know about the movie, they don't know. They're not going to be there. So I'm like, I think sometimes when something is new or people see it as risky or, oh, we don't know, they don't do anything. And then the film just doesn't have a life. So I would love to see marketing and grassroots marketing, community campaigns behind films so that they can have, make money and get to the audience.
Get behind a film like y'all do about that Popeye's chicken sandwich.
Yes.
I was just going to add that the instructions on the instructions are already there, right? So if you look at when you're talking about Birth of a Nation, around the same time, you're going to have Oscar Michaud produce, Black filmmaker, independently produce Within Our Gates as well. Body and Soul First, which will have Paul Robeson in it,
I wrote a whole paper.
Yeah, I know you do. And you probably do too. But and then Within Our Gates, right? So then Within Our Gates is a direct answer, or it's a direct resistance to Birth of a Nation. So I think, I'm saying this to say, 100 years of this, cinema that has segregated Black people, but you see running alongside that resistance movements from Black people, in cinema. And so I think that I'd like to think of myself as one of those people who was running alongside that independently, with Bilali and so there's another thing to talk about, which is that question, which is okay, how can they, look, this is being taped, but I made money. You know what I mean? Like I know how to make money on a project. Like I know how to make money. So some of it is like non-traditional ways of getting the word out. You know, we had when Muslims Guide to Marriage showed it out here, I think in LA, Pan African Film Festival, was like sold out every night. Like, you know, over 700 people saw the film. And it's like, there's a way that like, I don't know. I think it's just about understanding that I know we're getting access, but it seems like the access comes, but we've already been doing it, right? So it's like we're already in the process. So we make money, and just imagine about that exponentially, right? So if they like money, they gonna call us. If they don't like money, they don't call us, right? So the reality is like, I think the reality is that people are sick of the same old 100 years of cinema and you know, the same old same, right? Even the people who were writing it are sick of it, you know? So there's a way that at some point, everybody wants to see, you know, it's a movement to see stories that are diverse because we have choices now, right?
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, to add to my earlier comment, I agree that things have, hell yeah. Thank you.
I mean, you know,
The mic.
like there's a way that like they just. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure.
No, it's cool. I appreciate that. That was I got threats making that. Like, I literally, people was like, "Don't come to my city with that film." Like, that was hard to do. Like, I lost friends. Like, I realized like people would tweet or put Facebook message out for the movie, and their friends would be like, "Why are you supporting this, bro?" Like, and they would my friends would tell me they found out things about their friends, you know, like. But anyway, that's a side. But I wanted to follow up that other comment by saying how hopeful I am, right? Like, I literally see the shift happening. That didn't just happen. It like happened because people fought for it. Like, people literally said, no, we're not just gonna keep watching these things. And people stood up, and for years and years and years, they said, we wanna see something different. We wanna see ourselves. And they tried and tried and tried and failed many times. But but all of a sudden, this tipping point began to happen, maybe like 5 or 10 years, maybe 5, 6 years ago, where people started saying, all right, yeah, we're gonna give you that chance. And you started to see shows and movies that you would never have seen just 12, 13 years ago, you know? So I'm wildly hopeful for what's to come. Like, the things, I'm working on a couple things that like I wish I could talk about right now, but I can't. But that are in that space, and so I wanted to make sure I said that, because I don't like to live in the place of like, oh man, this is what happened. Like, I think we all have like, if this is, I don't know, this isn't a drawing, whatever. There's a thing here. This is you, and then you have like your marks, you know, like, how many marks do you got? All right, black, Muslim, man, you know, whatever, like, gay, like, so you have your marks, and then you figure out your marks. All right, how many do I have? 25. All right, cool. I got, 50 good ones. Let me go and work this thing out. Everybody has something. We've seen it with Me Too, the women, what y'all have been going through in this. Like, I knew it was bad. I have a sister as an actress, but I didn't realize, like, holy hell, this is crazy. And so, it's like figuring out what you have against you. Then it's like, all right, once you understand it, then you can better prepare yourself to go out into this industry.
So we have like maybe after your comment, we can open up to the audience for questions. So did you have? You can add
Yeah, I did. To add on, I feel like we're in a really exciting time where there's so many new things that we can create together, and I just think there needs to just be new platforms and new ways of getting our films seen. And I agree I agree like 100% with what you guys were saying, because I come from like a very independent art background where like I never asked for permission to tell a story. I always just made my films and did my screenings and found a way in like a community grassroots way. So I'm at a point right now as a filmmaker where I'm trying to merge that practice with also being introduced to an industry where that practice is kind of foreign. So I'm like, how can we like just make new models that don't have us begging to be let into something, but like honor what we do as a community and serving our community because they want to see the stories and they're gonna come out for them. So I'm just all for like, how can we just make new ways to get the movie seen? Yeah.
The final, or like, what are your on this new model? I mean, you're doing some new stuff too. So I mean, it seems like everyone's doing some innovative things and. You know, you have an old model, and I believe, I don't know if it's like a Ford saying, but like you don't always have to work within the whole entire, so that you create new models until the old one becomes irrelevant. And so there's some emerging stuff. So can you speak on maybe some emerging things that are happening in entertainment and Black Muslim narratives? Anything on the comedy set? I feel like the comedy has some like the stand-up has some cutting edge stuff. So is there something that you can share about it?
I just think in general with comedy, I think it's a really great vehicle to use to maybe send messages, you know, to have teachable moments just in general, because comedy is a great way of connecting. Laughter is a very natural reaction, and often you can make a statement in your comedy, and people are so distracted with laughter that maybe later on the drive home they're like, wait a minute, am I a racist? Is that what that joke meant? So but I don't know if that's something new. I think that's been happening for a very long time. I just think that like what you're saying with the industry changing and people being more open to different sorts of voices and narratives, that the lane is shifting and people are hungry for a different sort of story, a different narrative, and again, people that reflect their own experiences. Because, you know, I can watch a show and enjoy an episode of Friends, but it's really nice when I can watch something and I see people that look like me or talk like me or have experiences that are like my own. So.
Thank you.
So let's add one little tiny thing. Is it? I definitely feel like I agree. No begging, right? And so it's just about being very specific about what the story. You know, we as artists have to tell good stories, right? And I find that, like, I know I'm thinking of like the executive I work with over at Heartbeat, and you know, Tiffany listens to me. It's interesting to come into a room and people just be paying attention to you. Like that's new, right? So there's a way where people are just like paying attention to your story, and then they bring in people to help you make your story, and they treat it with importance. I'm thinking about how we demand that. We need to expect it, and then I think it will receive it.